Well, good evening, everybody. Those that are here and those that are online as well. If you're elsewhere, hopefully you're slightly warmer than it is in Toowoomba, which I believe is even colder than Hobart. So our recent relocatees from Hobart have brought the weather and then some, but we shall persevere. So last week we looked at light, and this week we're looking at water, both in the broader theme of metaphors of the Bible. So concepts, and in this case, really elemental, really the very basic building blocks, the things that were, created at the beginning, the things that we almost don't even notice in our day-to-day lives, that we take for granted. We looked last week at the idea of light, being necessary for the growth of the natural world, how starving of light, whether it is a plant, will kill it, but even of humans as well, that it can cause, all sorts of psychological distress and that type of thing. And that the darkness can be quite disturbing, and how the darkness is likened unto evil, wickedness, all of these things quite explicitly by the Bible. And on the flip side, the corollary, we see light being associated in quite a flexible way. We see God being referred to as light. We see Jesus being referred to as light. We see Christians being referred to as light. And we see the message that God and Christ brought into the world, and that Christians take with and reflect and respond to, that being referred to as light as well. And so perhaps the overall theme is this idea of illumination, in the words of Psalm, of having a light to our feet, a lamp to our path. I think I always get those flipped around the wrong way, but the point being is that the idea of knowledge. Remember Jesus gathering Martha to where Mary already was, to hear his words, and saying all the other things, they can wait. That the most important thing is to hear, to know, to understand, to receive the words of God, the words of life. And so I would argue that water is used in a pretty similar way, and we'll go through again quite a few scriptures in a moment. Those online will leave the scriptures with you. Very similar questions to last week, again looking at what is it that we're talking about. And remember, we mentioned the idea of a metaphor in its broader sense from the Greek is something that transfers its meaning. So it takes it from one thing, and because our brains can work on multiple tracks, that we can liken it to other things and gain understanding, reference points, different angles, ways into these things. We don't need degrees in poetry. We don't need to have studied literature to any degree. These things God has given us to understand. And so, as with light, water is so ubiquitous, but also takes on many forms. Sometimes water is extremely helpful. Sometimes water is extremely harmful. And I think in this country we appreciate that, again, both in volume and also in its type. And I think we'll see again when we look into the scriptures. I don't want to preempt it. I recognize, and particularly with our online audience, we won't have a lot of discussion and teaching. It's a bit more self-directed these times. But again, I think the scriptures are pretty clear once we have a look at a few of them and see the through line, or see that sort of connective tissue about how these concepts are used. So Aaron, we'll leave it there for those online. I'll just flick onto the next screen,